Here we go. Hi, guys. Thank you for joining. I know people are going to be keep joining throughout, so we will just crack on. Thanks for joining on a Tuesday evening, everybody. And yeah, very excited to be talking about in-person working in a world beyond the full-time office. So thanks for having us. It's a community that we at Hubble are very proud to sponsor, full of fantastic ops professionals. And I know we're going to touch on that at the end about how to join it if you're not a member already. But guys, really excited to be joined today by this fantastic panel. We've got Jazz, Scott, and Florencia with us. I'm just going to make sure I do this justice. So I've just got a couple notes to make sure I can introduce these guys properly. So Jazz leads ops at a global tech platform. We are 8 with offices in Europe, US, and Australia. And Jazz has actually been an ops consultant for many different companies, Series A to B. So we've seen multiple different types of organization and workspace situations. So we are very excited to be learning from her wealth of experience there today. Scott is going to be coming from a very remote first angle today, which is super exciting. He helped scale one of the first remote first companies back in 2012. Before that was really a thing, pre-pandemic. Since then, has helped loads of companies implement the future of work and actually hosts a podcast about remote leadership called Leading from Afar. So please do check that out as well. It's really, really interesting. And Florencia, I've actually done a webinar with before, so hello again. So Florencia is a people and talent lead with 5 years of experience with broad people skill set. So really, really interesting and coming from this more from a people ops angle as well. So really excited to hear her views on that. She's a big remote work first ambassador and work-life balance enthusiast, which is great. And she heads up people at Primer, who is actually a Hubble client who I've been lucky enough to work with as well. And on that note, we're Hubble. Hi. Hubble helps companies basically build their ideal workspace. So that could be a full-time office, part-time office, or access to on-demand workspaces all around the world, helping support distributed teams. So we kind of speak to companies all day long about every type of solution you can imagine. But I say that every day is a surprise. People come out with new and cool ideas. So really excited to hear everyone's views today. As a group, this panel, we put together what we think are some of the key topics to do with this. If you've got questions, which I'm sure and hopefully people will, please do ask them, get them in the chat. We're going to try and get to those as and when they crop up, if they're topical. Otherwise, we've got some time at the end to make sure we've covered all your questions, okay? So just to set the scene, as we all know, most companies, the vast majority, have moved away from having everyone in the office Monday to Friday. We don't really see that very often anymore at all. But what's next and what are the options? Now you've got full-time offices, oddly, still very, very popular. But that's not to say everyone's coming in Monday to Friday. It's just companies providing a space that people can go into if they wish, or maybe they have mandated days. We'll be talking about that in a second. There are part-time offices where people work 1 to 3 days in the office. They don't need an office for 5 days a week. Why would you pay for one when you could save 65% on office rent? Then there's access to on-demand memberships, which are more flexible ways of in-person working, or you can provide co-working for more distributed global teams. Now, with all of these, which coincidentally are all accessible through Hubble, check it out, they're all talking about in-person working. So I just want to take a step back and actually address in-person working itself. Like, what is it? What are the key benefits? Why are we talking about this? And why are they so keen on providing this for their employees? So Jazz, I'm going to come straight to you and ask that question first of all. Like, in what types of work activities, how are they enhanced by in-person working?
Yeah, absolutely. I think some of the best examples I've probably had personally are ones where we're really coming into work and focus on strategic problem solving, future thinking, or really getting collaboratively working together for an objective or a purpose with a clear outcome in mind. I think that's been probably one of the most valuable sessions that I've had. But actually, some people will also hear from some of my colleagues that might be on this call as well, know that I tend to come in the office sometimes when it's a little bit quieter. And that's more so that I can get focus time and get some more kind of thinking time and get away from my life and really focus on work. So I think there's probably a number of things that like people are using more effectively for in-person time. It's that team bonding, collaboration, socializing. Now, whether, you know, this needs to be mandatory or is more of a as and when needed, I think it's going to be a good conversation that we're going to kind of go through right now.
Also, I think that's a great way to start this. It's a lot of this comes down to the individual and how people want to work. I think that's going to be a running theme today. But Scott, I'd love to hear as well.
Absolutely. So again, I'm quite biased. As you had opened up, I helped build one of the first fully remote companies, eventually scaled to 1,000 people all over the world and a $2 billion valuation. On the work side, I don't feel there's any benefit of working in the office that's greater than can be done remotely. I think the reason why people come into the office is really more around the idea of relationship building and spending time with colleagues. That said, again, I believe the future, when we talk about remote, it's not work from home. Yes, I am working from my home office, but it's work from anywhere. And to some people, that means coming into an office. They may not have a space like I do. They may have kids banging on the doors and knocking on around like I do. It really comes down to what is the best location for each individual to decide where am I going to be my best and where am I going to do the best work. And some people, that's an office, it's a cafe, it's a co-working space through Hubble or other channels, or some people it does mean from home. So when it comes to work, I don't see anything that is better done remotely. But again, the interaction, the relationship piece is the core of why people are coming back into the office, or what people want to come back to the office.
Nice, thanks. And super. And I think that probably leads well into Florencia. So when you guys, you're a remote first company, and you always will be, as you very proudly say. When you guys meet up, what are the work activities you're saving for those situations, and what are the key benefits from when you do meet up?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a really good question. Thank you, Joe. I completely agree with Scott. I think the future is allowing people to work wherever they do their best work. And that's something that we do very well at Primer. I'm very proud of it, just because we give people options. And some of the options that we give people, besides co-working through Hubble or just meeting wherever they want to meet, is we have something called Workations. Which is basically you meet twice a year with your team, you pick somewhere in the world and you travel to that destination. And we save that precious time twice a year to do co-working, to do activities that are so much more, that are enriched by being done in person, as workshops, activities, bonding. So people tend to go to the workation with a set agenda or objectives that they wanted to achieve in that trip. And that includes a big part of it is just to have fun and to bond and to do, I don't know, we have people doing all kinds of things. Going surfing, going, I don't know, hiking in the mountains. It's very varied. And that's the way that we have found as a business to kind of reinvest in our people. The money that we will spend in a fixed office is kind of reinvested in allowing people to have these amazing experiences, to choose where they want to go, where they want to be, to make memories that will last a lifetime, get to see other places and get to engage with their colleagues in a very different way that they wouldn't through the async or remote work. And we also have an annual retreat, which is the opportunity for all of us to meet once a year and in somewhere in the world. And again, that space is sacred for company-wide activities, sessions, workshops, and again, to have fun and bond. So that's how we do it at Primer, and we're very lucky to have the ability to give people the option, but also reinvest in our employees.
nice. So I think that's awesome. Yeah, workation. I think Hannah just said that in the chat. That's a very cool. It's a very cool term. I've not heard that one. So there's a few running themes there. Really, it sounds like there's a building relationships within the business. There's a re-energizing. There's a kind of building fun experiences, but also per each individual that Scott and Jazz you mentioned on, it could just be actually getting to the office for peace and quiet. It may be for one individual to an office or a workspace is actually where they may do their best work. I know at Hubble, the way we kind of think about it is every type of work, every type of project has a different workspace that may be suitable for it. So there may be like creative type projects where it may be good to meet up and get together. There may be very deep space, deep thought ones where I don't want to go into the office if I've got big projects to map out. Like I'm RevOps, so I don't want to be mapping out workflows in a loud office. So I think every project, every individual has their different choices. And as you said, it's about providing options. I think that's going to be key. So saying that, if people are meeting up, how often? What is right? So Scott, like how often, if at all, should and could people be meeting up?
Absolutely. This is one of my favorite questions, and I think it really depends on whether the company is fully remote, whether they're located in the city, or what exactly the setup is. So if it's a fully remote company, that means people are everywhere, all over the world. The magic number is 3. There's been a lot of research that's been done in this specific area, and really 3 has come to be that number of one time the entire company gets together. So you bring people from everywhere in the world. One time is just the team. So your sales team, your support team, your marketing team. And then one time is the company implementing policies, procedures, and things to enable employees to see each other. So for example, I guess probably a lot of people here are London based. If you had people, let's say in Manchester, right, to have a policy where say, hey, we'll give each individual employee £150 to be able to travel from Manchester to London and spend the day. We'll pay for everyone to go to lunch, maybe get a Hubble space to actually work together, but giving a policy and procedures of getting people together on their own. So you're not getting the entire company together, you're getting individual employees together. I think that's a fully remote company. You may have companies, I helped about 5 or 6 companies with this during the pandemic that were mostly all located in the city. Right? They're all in London, they're all in Berlin, and they were trying to decide whether to keep an office or not. And what we did is we decided to get rid of the office, and once a month they rented an Airbnb, or they rented an office space where they got everyone together. Again, I think something that the Flo had mentioned, very big, or it was mentioned maybe by Jazz, like big picture, very strategic items that month or that quarter that we've spoken about, and getting catered lunches and dinners and spending the day together and having it for a purpose. It's not just, okay, let's just everyone get together to work that day, but for a bigger picture. So I really think it's depending on what type the company is. Again, fully remote 3 times. If you're all located in the city, right, it's probably fine to get together once a month. And really, obviously, depending, could be something in the middle for maybe more mixed teams.
Nice. And when we talk about people getting together and maybe remote employees getting together, and Francia, to your point, the workations with people meeting up, is it just important that people from the same company meet up? Is that just like a human need? Or is it actually, or do we want people from the same teams to be meeting up? Like, does it matter if when they're meeting up, they're not doing the same work together? Is it a developer and a salesperson? Or should it be meeting up to work on projects that you're both, actively working?
I think there's a mix, right? I think there's value in cross-functional work, a lot of it. So you say an engineer working with someone in sales. Yes, perhaps they don't do the same thing day to day, but what the engineer is producing, the sales team is selling. So I think there's a lot of value in itself in mixing teams up and making sure that there's some broad bonding per se within the people that work in the same business. I feel like that generates and fosters this sense of we're all in this together. We're all following the same mission. So I think that's important per se. From a human aspect as well, I don't feel like the value on meetups is only about the work that is produced, but also is about the bonding aspect of it, and fostering the sense of belonging. And the in-person activities are a super special, sacred kind of opportunity to achieve that. Not that you cannot achieve that remotely, but face-to-face will always have that magical serendipity of moments where you meet up with someone that you haven't met before, or perhaps that works in a different team. And all of a sudden you find yourself working together and either reviewing processes of how you work together, or, oh, I've done this thing. Oh yeah, it kind of generates this magic momentum of like just spontaneous conversations that might lead into something that you never ever thought about. And that is the magic of co-working or meeting in person. And the same thing happens when our people co-work in London through Hubble. And we have, everybody will just say, let's say in London, we have 40% of our workforce is in London. And someone will book a co-working space and, hi guys, I'm co-working on Wednesday. Who wants to come over? We can go for a drink afterwards. And it will be people from all different teams that happen to be based in London who meet up for a day. They do their own thing. Sometimes they do work together and then go for a drink afterwards and socialize a little bit, go for lunch together. So I think there's different things, right? There's value in both things, in targeted work. Okay, we're going to meet today and we're going to do this and that. And also allowing serendipity moments between teams that normally don't work together as well.
Nice. I think that's a great answer. I think the reason why I kind of wanted to dig into that is I think you're right, that's so important. And if people are thinking about budgets for this and how to budget for people meeting up, it is quite easy for leaders to not necessarily be aware of the friendship lines that exist within companies, which we know cross over departments. You're not just friends with people in your teams. So how much of this is, about employee satisfaction and wanting to have friends at work and actually that human need of wanting to meet up, and how much is about a productive, team planning within your specific teams itself. So empowering people to make their own decisions about where and how they meet, as opposed to just relying on team leads. I think that feels like everyone is in agreement that that's quite.
I'd actually like to step in here, Joe, if you don't.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, I did 3 podcast episodes specifically on this topic of getting people together. I think there's a right formula for each. Again, company-wide, it's a 50% unstructured time, 30% structured time, 20% work. So when you're getting the entire team together, especially remotely, mostly team building. When you're getting a team together, I think it's 50-50. But the most important thing, especially when you're getting multiple teams together, is the foundational word of all remote work. It's intentionality, where you need to intentionally create the opportunities for people on multiple teams to get together and interact, because we're all tribal people. When Envision did their IRL, their company retreat back in 2019, it was very interesting. Each meal was like a sociology experiment. Your APAC team, sales team, sat with your APAC sales team, your iOS team sat with your iOS team. Every team sat siloed together at each one of the meals. And because either I'm an extrovert or because I was the first employee there, I sat at a different table every single meal. I refused to sit with my team. They drove me nuts. Why aren't you sitting with us? I said, listen, I talk to you every day. All these other people, I have no idea who they are. I'll never interact with them. And I think this is a very important point of finding those intentional opportunities to get people to speak to each other that normally don't collaborate, don't speak with each other. Because again, when you're in that environment, you don't know other people, the people who you're going to most likely speak with and hang out with are the people that you collaborate with and you work with on a daily basis. And if the point is to build relationships for the entire organization, you need to create those opportunities intentionally to have those moments happen, because realistically, they're not going to happen on their own.
That I would like links to those podcasts, please, Scott. That sounds fascinating. Those ratios, that sounds super interesting. I want to cover another aspect of this. Now, when we talk about how often should we be meeting up, lots of people are wondering, okay, maybe we already have an office. Maybe we're already in contract, or we've chosen to have an office. We've got a critical mass of people in one area. Do we say how many days they have to be in? Or do we let them decide and they can come in by themselves? Like, is it mandated or is it choice? And Jazz, I'd love to pick your brains on kind of how do you provide enough value that people feel they want to come in?
Absolutely. And I think this is a really interesting one, because I've personally worked in all different types of setting where it's completely remote to then being almost forced to go into a hybrid model or going into a full-time in-person role. And I think the big thing, as someone who's going to initiate this or wants to encourage more people to come into the office, is really taking a step back and trying to understand, why is it so important to do so, which will probably dictate whether it needs to be mandatory or not. And almost kind of taking a step back and looking at your team leaders, managers, C-suite, the leaders that will be talking to everybody, trickling down the communications, and asking them, why do you feel like it's so important to come into the office? You will get a really interesting set of answers from a lot of people. And I think that's really key, because if you're not empowering those people to understand why you're doing this, usually what happens is the rest of the business will start to kind of lose an understanding of why they need to be coming in. What is their purpose? How often do it, and I've seen businesses where they've set one day that's mandatory and not really necessarily given a reason, but just said, we want everyone in person together. And that becomes a shambles after a couple of weeks because everyone's thinking, well, I've come here, what have I got out of it? So I think it's so key that, one, you're really thinking about the purpose, stepping back, but also empowering the rest of your business to understand why that is, and not making it about a personal reason. Like, there's been occasions where I've been in a business where the founder has always worked in a fully in-person setting. And for them, not seeing someone in the office means they're not working. But then there's also the challenge, which is a bit more personal. But then there's also the challenge of presenteeism, being in the office, but not really being there. So how productive does that really make you? I think, so using that as a step, and actually thinking about the purpose, I think it goes back to that. And actually a point to Florencia as well, these workations, for instance, it makes, and correct me if I'm wrong, Florencia, but I'm sure the planning and the structure of that workation makes it so much more intentional of why people need to come together. And I think that probably amplifies why you have those days, specifically days or workations or 3 days in the office. So kind of want to pick on that.
Yeah, 100%. I think intention is really important. As both of you said with Scott, right? Like the planning behind it, and I think that something that you said is super interesting is that people buy into the why of things. If you just because I've seen it in companies around me where you have to go back to the office 3 times a week, no reason given. No, just an authoritarian decision made by someone at the top that wants to use the office space because they already have it and they already bought it, or whatever it is, that they have to justify the usage of this space, making no difference in performance, making no difference in anything else, but we just have to kind of use it, roll with it, and giving little to no explanation to people into why the reasoning is. Even if the reasoning is financial, it's better for you to, as you said, to explain the why behind it, and perhaps you're going to get people buying into it more. But people buy into the why of things, right? So I feel like these, mandatory sessions where you have to be in the office for a set period of time or a set day of the week, without very little to no explanation, is so detrimental. And you can get a lot more of people if you explain the why, which is something really interesting that I like that you said that. But yes, workations or any other, as Scott said, any session that is planned with the objective, even if the objective is to have fun and bond, I feel like it gives people a permission to do so. It gives people the permission to, okay, this is bonding time, this is fun time, this is get together, do something fun time without the guilt that comes with not being at work, or being at work but not perhaps doing work, which is not the only way of being productive, right? We know that the things that we do in workations and the time that we allow people to be together in the same room, then it just has a ripple effect for the rest of the year. This is why we do it twice a year, because we kind of want people to see each other at least every 4 months. We have the retreat in the middle, and we know that the initiatives that we do that week, then that condensed period of time, it ripples throughout until the next one, and then until the next one.
I think there's some really interesting points there, guys. I think there's some key, actually, because we had some questions on this before, actually, around like, what can we do? Like, do we do lunches and stuff like that? I really think that depends on your business. Like, remember, if people are only in once a week, they may be coming in to see their friends, and their friends may not be in the same team. So if you are a team lead or you're advising team leads, it starts with asking the individuals, do they want to do a team lunch on that day? I wouldn't force it on them, because they may have friends in other teams they actually just want to see, and that's the most exciting part of why they're coming in. Other things are really good to do. Team meetings, like our marketing team are often in on Wednesday, and they will have their team meeting on a Wednesday. There are one-on-ones on that day. Like, just being sensible about how you're scheduling. There is 0 point asking someone to come in who sits on Zoom all day with their headphones. Like, you can do that at home. It doesn't make sense. I get very frustrated if I was asked to come in for some reason, I was just sitting on Zoom. I'd be like, this is a complete waste of my day. I've lost traveling time. I've lost, so many aspects. Another point with that, which I've heard of bugbears of going in on certain days from employees, is consistency. And Scott, I know that's a big part for you. Like, if you are going to bring people in, there's a consistency element to it, isn't it? So people can plan.
Absolutely. I think it's very much of a catch-22. On the one side, the forced return to office will be the death of many companies. You can look into the crystal ball and put this date in the calendar. Companies that force people to come back to the office will be finished in the next 2 years. But at the same time, if you're coming back to the office, if you don't have a specific policy, if the point is to spend time with your colleagues, if you're not all on the same days, then what's the point of coming in? So if you're going to do a hybrid type schedule, which again, I will not talk about that here, but they at least should be on the same day, again, because the purpose is to spend time together. Again, whether it's in meetings, won't speak about that either, or whether it's just to have lunches or have coffees or something like that. Again, if you're coming into an office and none of your friends are there and people you want to spend time with, what's the reason, what's the purpose of them going in? So I think if you're going to do it, it's very important that people come together in the same day. Again, I think that opens the can of other difficulties. People have schedule, and especially with families, and they have kids and other things, and it causes a lot of other potential issues. But at the same time, if the purpose is for FaceTime, you need as many faces there as you can get.
Nice. I think it's really key. Speaking of which, I think we're just about to lose Ride Tandem because they are making the most of their office day. They're all off to the pub at 6 p.m. So guys, enjoy. Any last minute questions in before you drop off? That's super interesting. Thank you, guys. I think another thing that came up around why are we bringing people in? Why are some companies so keen? There is an aspect of, and Jazz, you leaned on this, some CEOs, some founders have always worked in a office-based environment. And so if they're not seeing people in, is that productive? Some of that really does come down to your reporting on productivity. I feel that's a big thing. And how are we as ops, managers, how are we pushing that up to senior leadership? Like, how are we tracking productivity? Because if we can show that actually it is just as productive and that employees can be just as productive and their satisfaction can be higher by having the choice, does that help us, help up manage those CEOs and founders who may be slightly more biased towards the office? And another point around that justification, one thing that can really take the edge off, and I really think this is what's been such a big move towards part-time offices, 1 to 3 days a week, is that suddenly you don't have to justify a 5-day-a-week office because it's really hard to do. Like, often people aren't in on a Monday or Friday. It makes sense. We never wanted to do it pre-COVID, and people don't want to do it now. And so having that like centralized energy in the middle of the week, lots of companies are leaning to. And if you're a finance or someone in control of the budget, it really takes the edge off. So that's always something key that people can think about if they are thinking about having an office that people can go to. Part-time offices are a thing, so do check it out. So yes, please jump in.
And actually, it's a really interesting one because I know Scott and Florencia have mentioned this as well. This idea of socializing or belonging or being together is kind of some of the core reasons why people need to come together. But actually, I've worked in an organization for 6 months where I did not see a single person in person, but I made some of the best friendships I did. And the reason why that is again, that we put in mechanisms in place which were really intentional about how we can get to know one another, whether that was things like, you might see this in operations nations, but like donut coffees. So you're talking to people in different spaces or teams, etc. Or we did things like show and tells, where it was specifically people being given the opportunity to talk about their role and what it does, highlighting them, spotlighting them. And then it just makes it so much more, proactive in wanting to reach out to others and talk to them, and having social spaces on Slack. And I think sometimes we get quite bogged down by this idea of people we only want to have offices because we want to meet one another and engage with one another. But actually, there are still a lot of mechanisms that enable you to do that, even in a completely remote environment. And I think being able to show that and having those frameworks from the get-go is going to be really, really helpful. And just another point around it is that hiring with intention, I think, is such a key thing. So when you are going to set up a hybrid model, for instance, or you are going to have set days, when you're hiring, be incredibly transparent about that. What the last thing you want to do is say we have a flexible working environment, which then doesn't translate, because actually you want everyone in on a Monday and a Tuesday and a Wednesday, and you never made that clear. And I think as an individual who's going into a business, you want to be as transparent as possible about your needs and what works for you, but the business also needs to be really transparent about what works for them. And I think having a little bit of a play there is quite useful.
It's a really key point. Like, it's okay for a business to say, we'd like to have people in. Like, we think that's a core part. That's actually okay to say. I know, Scott, you said some of those, they may not exist in 2 years, but I think it's okay to say that if your flag's in the ground, because, you know, there may be people who want that, but it's not fair to consistently change that policy, because people just can't plan, and you have to be able to plan your life. It just doesn't work otherwise. Scott, you came off mute. I feel like you wanted to jump on something that Jazz said there.
No, I think, no, to your point, that's very much the argument with the RTO. It's companies said, yes, we support remote work. You can go move wherever. I read 3 or so weeks ago that Amazon, who supported remote work for a while, changed their policy to the point where they were paying employees to move back to the urban areas that their offices were. So, hey, we support you, go wherever you want, live wherever you are, have a great quality of life. Oh no, not only can you not work remotely, but we're going to pay to move you back over to the center. I think that's extremely silly. But I think also to one of Jazz's point, I think it really comes down to, it's really a leadership thing. And I had this conversation actually with somebody this morning. It's really me versus we. And this founder CEO spoke, well, this is the way I've worked. This is what I know how to do. This is what right? As a leader, it's never I, it's never me. You know, we spoke about why, right? Simon Sinek, I have most of his books behind me. You know, it's all about the team. You put the team first. As a leader, you do what's best for the team and not best for yourself. And if your team has been very, very clear over the last few years, hey, we expect flexibility. If that's what's best for them, and that's what's best for the team, that is going to be what's best for the company, because what's best for the company is best for what's an employees. And by going against that, not going to be so good.
That's super interesting. We've spoken a lot around individual choice and how we ask people, and thinking as we, and trying to cater to the people in your business. I'd love to ask an open question to people listening, so please put it in the chat. How often do you take a survey or a pulse check of what your employees want from their workspace? I would love to know this, because I think there isn't a right answer, and I think it depends on your business, but it would just be good to see how often people are doing this. Maybe we can all learn from each other. Does anyone have a good way of doing this that they've seen work really well? Is it as simple as a little Slack poll, or is it something more sophisticated? And do you guys, anyone in the panel, do you guys do this in your businesses?
Well, not really mine, just because we are, sorry, Scott, we are and have been. However, it's part of our employee satisfaction survey, the co-working spaces or the co-working method, and the same thing with the retreats and the workation. Where we have found a trend in the last survey that we released in June was people wanting more remote activities, which was quite refreshing. So we have as well the donut coffee. We have a bi-weekly, every 2 Fridays, we all meet up, the entire company meets up, and people present and we give business updates. So we're trying to reinforce async communication, and then in meetings communication as well, and restarted the whole remote games thing, which was a thing at some point, a primer, and then it kind of faded out, and now we're bringing it again as part of a result of the surveys. So we don't really survey about the time in the office, because that was never going to be our thing, but we do survey about the needs, the different needs of people in terms of how would they like to work in general.
And Jazz, in the various businesses you've been in, what have you seen that's worked well in terms of echoing what people want?
Yeah, I think
into decision.
It's a really interesting one, because I think what I've seen is, as ops people, we can sometimes be afraid of getting too much feedback. Because we feel like actually we're just gonna have to do that, or we're gonna have to make those changes. But I think the best ones I've seen have been very much where we do send out our survey, but we're also keeping an ear out and listening ad hoc and making a safe space for people to talk about what they would like, and then really trying to understand it, but never giving the impression that that is going to happen. But actually, we're going to take that feedback on and we're going to see how that works in the grand scheme of things. I think that's always been quite useful. And also, I think the best companies are the ones that, like I said, again, at the hiring point, are so intentional about the way they're going to work, that anyone coming into the business already knows that this is going to be the way that the business operates, that this is the way that we're going to be working. And obviously in those cases, then there'll be the individual cases that might come up, which, as life happens. And then it's a case of really thinking about, okay, how flexible can we make our policy? And if not, what can we do that is going to actually be beneficial to them, or help or mitigate some of those concerns that they have. And I think it's fair to say that sometimes you're not going to have that as a business, and the individual's not going to be able to kind of meet in the middle. And that's where we have to let go of this need of, again, retaining everyone and keeping hold of everyone. It's understanding that as a business, we grow, individuals grow, and everything kind of needs to move in that effect. But I think, again, like I said, as operations people, we can really hold tight and really control a lot of the feedback we get. So I think just letting go of that slightly could be really helpful.
Nice, awesome, guys. Talking about collecting feedback is probably a whole webinar in itself. So I'm gonna move on from that bit. But maybe if anyone has any ideas about what they're doing, please do share it in the own community. And then moving on to, Florencia, this is something you guys do incredibly well, and we've touched on workations already. But in terms of your global meetups, like, what are the alternatives to an office for in-person working? How are you guys doing this?
Beyond, as I said, beyond workations and retreat, I think coworking is a big part of our strategy, because it resonates, or it responds to one of our values, but not like the company values, but one of the values that we have at Primer, very much embedded in our culture, which is freedom, choice, and ownership. And ownership from the day one, ownership from the get-go, and implicit trust in our employees, and trust that they know what works for them, trust that they know how to do their best work, and giving them the option. And that's where Hubble comes in. And for us, it has been the perfect solution, because we have all kinds of personalities in the business, as any business will do. And we have people who crave that in-person working. As Scott said, we have people who have children at home, or other responsibilities that might take their attention, or sometimes simply they just want to get out of the house and go to a city for a day and I don't know, have a nice lunch somewhere, or meet friends for coffee afterwards, or a drink afterwards, and it's convenient to go and work from the office. So I think in that sense, it allows us to kind of cater to most people. I know, Jess, you mentioned it is just like that. We're never going to make 100% of people happy, because people want different things. But the best we can do, or the closest we have gotten in Primer, is by giving them the option. And co-working spaces have worked wonders for us, quite seriously. When people come from other countries as well, they happen to be in London, and just a message on the chat. We have an integration with Hubble in Slack that actually tells you when someone booked a place, and you can see it easily and say, oh, actually, I'm going to join because I'm also around, or I want to see this person who's coming from wherever and happens to be in London in that week. So I think for us, it's just about choice. And yes, we have workations twice a year. Yes, we have the retreat, but in between, there's a lot of people who crave that time, and giving them the option to book the co-working spaces, or we have people who also work regularly, so that have their desk at a certain working space in London or any other cities, and they go 2 or 3 times a week just because they like it. So options, it all comes to options and ownership, and give people the chance to do what's best for them, because everybody wants different things. We also have people who don't like workations, who don't like to go to retreats, who are very introverted and don't really enjoy the exposure of being around 100 people at a time and having to socialize all day. We have that too. So we kind of allow people to do pretty much what they want, what they feel is best for them.
Awesome, thanks. And it sounds like what you guys, you've got it going on really well. for Primer, and I say that for you guys as an organization and what you've chosen to be, kind of put flag in the ground, and it sounds like it's working really well for you, which is fantastic.
So far so good.
Yeah, no, it certainly seems so. How do you guys think, as a company scales, if you're testing something for people listening, having a consistent yet flexible kind of working policy can be quite difficult to achieve. And as a company scales, how do you think you can help cater to individual preferences? So, Jazz, we've discussed this last week briefly, but I don't know if you have any ideas on that, because and Scott, to your point, even Amazon, they got it wrong, right, for what they wanted to do, and then they decided to reverse it and try and get people back. Like, as for individuals, we have lives. We need to plan our lives. Like, we can't just like move to a different side of the country and then find out that wasn't okay suddenly the next year. Well, do you have any advice for companies who are looking to put those kind of policies in place?
Yeah, definitely. So I'd say, I mean, some of the things that I've done previously is really either sticking to a specific model. So whether that is fully remote first or it's going to be hybrid. Again, hiring with intention as we scale, so the people that we're bringing in. But there's also a case of giving a little bit more in terms of manager discretion or team discretion, which I think, again, as ops people, we like structure, we like processes, but there's a level of flexibility we need to provide. I'm probably more on the side of the flexibility, and let's not go with hard rules that everyone has to follow. But I appreciate some businesses may need a specific reason for that, which they need to go follow a certain process. But I think the idea of being able to give manager discretion or having that conversation at a leadership level where there are certain exceptions made, but they are fair, they have a valid reason for why those are happening. And again, that can go into muddying waters, like what is considered fair. But let's take that step first. So I think that's really key. Actually, that's probably the main one that I would actually go with.
I think that's yeah, guys, take note. I think that was a really key point. And Scott, I'd love to kind of, while still on this point, just talk about managing remote as we talk about company scaling. What do you think are some of the key differences of managing remote work for smaller businesses as opposed to larger businesses? Is it the same? Is it different? Are there different things you have to keep an eye on?
Sure. So first, if I can argue, Jazz, with you,
yeah, please do.
Argue with that thought. I'm sorry. I know a couple of companies had also implemented the idea of putting it up to team managers. I'm personally not a fan of that because it creates a different culture within the same organization. That you could be either, if you wanted to work from home, let's say, you could be either really lucky that your manager says, okay, work from home, or you could be really unlucky to not have that manager that says, hey, you need to be back in the office. And then I get frustrated because my colleagues and the other team are getting to work from home and we don't have that same synchronous experience. I apologize to argue from that. But I think the biggest need, and I kind of answer the question, I think to answer the first question as well, biggest, I think, mistake that almost every company that was remote during the pandemic and is now either hybrid or what model, it's number one, none of them changed how they operate, right? Remote works the complete opposite of how office work works. Nobody changed how they operate to work for remote first. Every company needs to. Number two, and I think a bigger issue to kind of answer the second is nobody upskilled or trained their managers how to work remotely. Again, totally different. I'll give you a kind of a great example. I had a previous manager who came from an office environment, was a fantastic manager, and always, hey, whatever you need, I support you, just put my name on everything, like whatever it is, any blockers, put my name on it, get him out of the way, was fantastic. But because he came from an office experience, he got to see how everybody was doing and how work was going by seeing them in the water cooler, by having lunch with them. So he always kind of had a finger on the pulse by just being around in the office. In a remote environment, you don't have that same experience. So I had a bi-weekly with my manager. 1 out of the 2 didn't show up for. So I spoke with my manager 1 time a month. So how does my manager know the impact that I'm making to the business? And how do I know that my manager knows the impact that I'm making to my business? So I would say, I mean, as a company scales, hopefully there's being multiple levels of leadership that are coming into place, because I think the most people that really one person can lead is about 6 to 10. So anything beyond that, I think is chaotic beyond that. But I don't really see too many differences between a scaling organization. It's, again, do you have the training of how to be a remote manager? Because again, in that example of, I'm used to seeing people in the office and having coffee with them and see how everything is going. And if I don't understand, hey, I need to every other day or two times a week go onto Slack and just DM the 3 easy best words of company culture leadership. How are you? And when you do it in the right way of, hey, I'm actually concerned. I care about you. I care how you're doing. I care about how you're doing personally. I care how you're doing professionally. You build a culture where people will share feedback. And I know we've spoken about that before. But if you don't know, hey, I have to do that, you're never going to notice burnout. You're never going to notice things that are changing with somebody. You're never going to notice dips in productivity. So you really need to train your managers how to be remote managers, because again, it requires the magic word intentionality. And if you don't know that, there's only so much that you're going to do and so impactful that you could possibly be in a remote environment.
Do you believe that if managers had the training, that then they could make more decisions in terms of how their team work? Because I guess, Jazz, to your point, is it around how managers want to work to suit them, or is it how managers want to work for their team? Because I've certainly heard that some sales teams find it really useful to be together for energy. If you're doing cold calls, it's much nicer doing that in a room. Well, some people may find it nicer being in a loud room where there's energy. Otherwise, it's quite deflating and you're stuck there all day being like, no, okay, bye. Or is it because also I know there are many developers I know who have an amazing home setup with multiple screens who don't want to come in to use one monitor and it be loud. So is it more, to your point, around managers because they're managing certain teams, or is it more around how they want their team to work?
I would definitely say it's what makes your team productive. What works for one person versus another is going to be completely different. And at the end of the day, as a business, we are trying to achieve a goal. We're not here to micromanage and watch people over their shoulders and see what they're trying to do. It's, are we getting the results we want? So I think that is going to be really key. That, are you getting the productivity you need from your employees? And how is that measured? Is that through OKRs? Is it through objectives? Is it through certain metrics, etc.? Being quite clear about that. And actually taking it a step back as well. Like, I feel like manager training is such a big topic in itself that most businesses, and I know Scott will agree, don't tend to get right in the get-go anyway. I think that's so important. But if you can have certain values, certain guiding principles that can really hone in into how should we behave, how should we be thinking about our employees, you kind of take away that what you've learned before, or the ego or the power trip piece, and you really work to empower your employees in the right way. And if you can put yourself in that situation too as a manager, like how would you like to be treated, it kind of then starts to play both ways. But I would always go back to the idea of productivity. Like what does that look like? For one individual, it could be they're really geared up in a noisy room and they get a lot done. For someone else, that could be locked away in a room by themselves, but they still get the job done. So again, it goes back to, like, I've always been an advocate for a bit more flexibility. Personally, I know there's days where I will be more productive with people around me, depending on the task, and other times I'll be more productive when I've got no one around me. But as long as my manager is able to see what I've done and what I've achieved, is really the base principle we should be working with right now.
Nice, love that. Again, kind of coming back to individual choice, what works for a certain project. That seems to be the running theme today. But one thing, Scott, as you said, I love that specific training for managing remotely. I think that's so important. I remember there was a point where we were pretty remote and there was a hybrid aspect, but I was managing a bit more than that 6 to 10, like you said. And it was a bit chaotic, and it was difficult, and it was harder. There was so much more intention that you had to do, which meant you really had to think about it a lot more doing that remotely than I ever did being in person. Because being in person, I find that quite natural. It was a lot easier. So that's super interesting. Does anyone know on the panel, or has anyone used in the audience any manager training which is specific towards remote manager training? Or Florencia, is that something that you guys provide at Primer as well?
To be completely honest, not specific to remote. We have our retreat coming up in October, and we have some sessions around it in October, both for the wider of the company, or how we can work better async, and how we can make the most of remote working, and also some management training specifically, but not something that we have done in depth in the past, but something that we're very much looking to reinforce now. Most of our managers, we have a couple of new managers. Most of our managers have been with us for a while now, so they're very much accustomed and used to the remote setting, and they're very good at it. But we want to invest in management training a lot more, and we're kicking off with sessions in the retreat, which is happening in 3 weeks. So there's a lot coming up there, both for the ICs on how to make the most of remote working and async, and both for the managers as well.
Busy at your end. No, that sounds super exciting. And Scott, was remote training something you always had baked in Vision right from the start?
It wasn't. I would say only in the sense that back in 2012, there were 3 or 4 other companies maybe doing this. And so the remote training didn't really exist. And a lot of it really came about by itself, and by just trying things yourself and being in that world. I think one of the best recommendations, again, not to promote my own podcast, but this is exactly what the podcast was about specifically. An episode's about how to give one-on-one feedback, critical feedback remotely, how to do things async, how to be able to spot burnout, and how to do engagement. So the podcast is very, very specific on this topic of how to be a remote manager. Because again, people need this knowledge of how to do it, because this is the future. Even if you have spaces, even if you have a subscription to Hubble, and some people are in the office and some people aren't, the entire way that the organization must run is a remote first operating system, and whether you have spaces or not. So people have to know, managers have to know how to be a remote manager, and whether they're in a space or they're on the space.
Awesome. And thank you. And I think one of the key things being a remote manager is that question, how are you? And intentionally seeing how your team are doing. And we have a good question here from Anise around what thoughts do we have to support team members who are feeling isolated or having mental health issues when they aren't in person, or even avoid being in person because they're going through a difficult time? Like,
yeah.
How do you tackle that? Yeah, please do. Yeah,
I would like to jump in this one, because it's something I'm a psychologist and mental health practitioner, so it's something very close to my heart as well. It's tricky. I won't lie, and it's tricky. Without that opportunity of seeing someone day to day, and to notice the shift in their mood, or the way that they're carrying themselves throughout the room, or the way they speak, and so on and so forth, it adds a layer of complexity. It doesn't mean it's impossible, but it definitely adds a layer of complexity that if you are in person every day with someone in the office, it's a lot easier to pick up those cues and changes in someone's behaviors. However, it still can be done. So I think one thing that is absolutely key, and again, it feels like we're also aligned, which I love it, is coming back to what Scott said, which is about your managers and how they care. Because obviously, if you have a company of 1,000 people, of 100 people like we do, even though we people partners or people, members of the people team, are very much, or try to be as much as aware as we can and on top of things as we can, we rely on our managers to give us information about their team members, because we can't talk to every IC all the time. So we rely on our managers being that person that cares enough and see their team members enough to notice those changes and alert us of them. So most of teams will gather daily for stand-ups daily. If it's not daily, it's weekly. And managers will have at least a weekly meeting with every member of the team. So the longest you can pass without seeing your manager is a week. And if that, because mostly you will see them every day. So your manager, if by the fact that, and again, coming back to what Jess said about the intentional hire intentionally the people who are going to be people first, and then they're going to take care of the performance, and then they're going to take care of the technical skills, but the humanity of it and the care behind it is what is going to give us the information that we need to then approach that person and offer extra support. From the get-go, though, because we very much care about this, we have two different, at Primer at least, we have two different services. So we have a 24/7 support service through a company called Spill, which is an application, an integration with Slack. It's super easy to use. Literally, you just send a message and you get a session booked in. It's super easy. And also, sorry.
We use Spill as well. It's fantastic service. Yeah,
it's
really
good.
It's
such a good service, and we had a lot of actually people using it, which is great. And then through our private insurance in every single country, we offer mental cover as well, mental health cover. So we're trying to, even though if people don't feel comfortable enough to talk to our manager or to the people team about how they're feeling, we can guarantee that they will have external support 24/7, because both Spill and the counseling sessions that we offer through the health insurance are to offer support 24/7. So if they need someone to talk to, if they need counseling sessions, or they need just literally someone to pick up the phone and talk about what's stressing them out, they have us, but they also have external services in case because some people feel super comfortable in using that, and the people team, we work in an open door policy, meaning that everybody can book time with us without having to even say anything. Just they use our calendars as they need to, and obviously everything remains absolutely confidential with us, so they can approach us with things about their personal lives or things that are concerns about work. And we have a lot of people who use that, and some of the people that might not feel as comfortable. So again, it comes back to giving people options. And I know we're very fortunate because we have the means to be, and I know that perhaps in linear organizations or organizations that are in an early stage of development, they might not have the budgets for these kind of services. And we are very lucky to have the means, but also we have been very smart at where do we allocate those means and where do we allocate the budget, and make sure that we have these things for our priorities covered, because we want people to have the right support lines. And but yeah, managers are a crucial part in this, in picking up these cues and picking up the changes in behaviors, and then we can jump in and offer the extra help.
Can I throw 2 points in there?
Yeah, please do. We've got like a minute, so yeah, please do.
I'm gonna do it super fast, and these are super easy. And again, I think it comes down to training. Number one is, as a leader, you lead from the front. So you need to have a channel, and whether it's public channel, whether it's a team channel, whether it's one-on-one, you as a leader need to share, hey, this is what I'm dealing with. Me, your leader, your manager. And this is something I've shared over the years. When I've had issues with mental health things, I had chest pain. One night I thought I was having a heart attack on like a Friday night and called the ambulance. I shared this thing. I wanted my team to know what's going on with me, because that creates an environment of transparency where other people feel more comfortable. Well, if, hey, my manager is sharing all these things they're dealing with, and the kids are driving me crazy, which many times they did, it makes people feel more comfortable to share themselves. And the second thing, and again, which doesn't cost anything, is an actual mental health day. And I've told this to people on my team, if you need a mental health day, you call it a mental health day. It's not a sick day. I don't have a fake cold or whatever it is, or I need a mental health day, and be very clear, this is what it's for. And again, as a leader, you need to do that. And it's something that I've done in a couple of days, was up all night and the kids were this and things, and said, hey, I'm going to be out today, need a mental health day, tough night, or whatever the situation was. And again, creating that environment of transparency and creating that environment where people feel comfortable to say, yes, I'm having a tough day. I need some time off, mental health day, and do it.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for that. They're fantastic answers to which is a big question and so important. So thank you. We are almost very nearly at time. So I'm going to hand over to Kirandeep just to wrap up and talk a little bit about On. Guys, I can't thank you enough for all your amazing answers and for being here today. Thank you everyone for listening and all your questions. From Hubble's point of view, I just wanted to share something. It's the Workspace Satisfaction Report that's just come out. It's key takeaways of a survey from like 200 plus CEOs, HR, ops professionals. If you did it yourself, thanks so much for doing the survey. But it covers loads of stuff that we've spoken about today with some data. So hopefully some interesting pieces. So I've just put the link there. Please just enter your email and have a look at that. And if anyone has any questions about how to do this practically with Hubble, please shoot me a line on LinkedIn or just go to the website. And if you've got any questions for any of the speakers, I'm sure they'd be happy to chat to find them on LinkedIn. I'm sure you can ask them any questions on there if you didn't manage to today. So guys, thank you so much. Were you going to jump on and just say a little bit about On? I think that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for an incredible session. I think that was absolutely fabulous. We will be sharing all of the main takeaways and everything after this session, so keep an eye out on your email. We'll also be sharing our wonderful panelists' contact details if you do have any of the questions, as well as all of the links that have been dropped into the chat today. So don't worry if you've not got them down right now, we will be sending them to you. And I just did drop a link to our events calendar. We do have the International Ops Festival coming up next month, which we will be continuing the conversation around all things culture and ops, giving more practical tips and just continuing on this great journey that we're on today. So if you are interested, please take a look at that. And again, thank you to our great panelists for a wonderful session.
Thank you for the invite. It was so much fun, guys. I loved
Thank you
it.
so much.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank
Have
you.
a great Tuesday evening.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
See you.
See you. Bye.